Hey guys, Stealther. In this deck review I'm looking at the Soviet-Korean Alliance. This is one of the new alliances that was introduced in DLC 3, and it consists of the Soviets and the North Koreans. Now, when I saw this alliance, I wasn't really that impressed with it, because the Koreans don't really have that much to offer to the Soviets, I think. You get some interesting infantry from the North Koreans, or at least some cheaper infantry, because the Red 4 infantry, USSR infantry, is usually pretty expensive. And otherwise, the only real units that you get are the T-90S and the B-5, or at least that's my take on it. So for now, I'm reviewing the deck that was sent in by Jaeger, and let's have a look at what he is going for. His setup is that he's generally using this for 2v2 matches and 10v10s, but they can be it can be an all-purpose deck if it needs to be. So let's have a look. He also wants to know if this deck is viable in its current state and whether improvements can be made, since it's his first Red 4 deck that he's created himself. So let's have a look. He has two Mi-6 helicopters in here. Now an Mi-6 gives you 3,700 units of supplies, so this is slightly over 10,000 that you have here. It's 1,100 supplies. I think that it would be better to bring one fob, because deploying one fob is way cheaper than deploying one Mi-6. This is 75 points for 8,500 points. And you have a base for the units that he has in here, which is not really that resource intensive. But it's an armored deck, and these tanks can start to really drain your supplies, especially since some of them are coming with the HGMs. So I'm going to delete the Mi-6, get a fob in here and make sure that he has enough supplies. Then he has one UAZ, so a standard command vehicle, and a T-80UK, so he went for a very expensive command tank. Now, I rarely, if ever, use command tanks. That doesn't make them bad units at all, because these things have 20 frontal armor, which makes them extremely difficult to kill, but also a prime target, because it's a 200 point unit. These things have been price buffed, in the sense that they are now a lot cheaper than they were. I think that this tank used to cost you about 230 points, and that made it by far the most expensive tank in the game. Having these things in is going to be interesting, especially if you have a very heavily contested zone, because it is usually more survivable than a standard UAZ. Now with this setup he has 8 command vehicles, which might be a little high, especially in a 2v2 where you have an ally who can also help you out. I don't think that you need 8 command vehicles. So we're going to stick to the T-80UK and have a look at the other command units that we can bring in, which is the BMP-1K. It has some armor, it has even an HGM, which is pretty unusual for a command vehicle. And then it has the Grom, both of which are not great weapon systems, but if need be, this thing can fend for itself. That is, against light targets. We can take a T-71K1. You can get 3 of those. They tend to get pretty expensive if you start to bring in command vehicles worth 150 points. But I'm considering bringing in the YW701 command vehicle. We get 4 of those. You get some armor, you don't get a weapon on them. Some people like having weapons on their command vehicles because it can defend them if need be. Personally, I'm not a big fan of it because I think that the command vehicle is only going to give itself away, and that's not something I really favor. So in this situation I'm going to go for the 701 because it's going to save me 10 points. And I know that having weapons on them is nice, but as just explained, that's why I'm not taking them. Otherwise he has Ural 4320s, 1100 supplies on those, 70 kph. They are not the best supply vehicles that are available, but the limitation from the armored deck makes it so that we have to go for this unit, because the other cargo is not as good. It carries less supplies, it's not as fast, and the ZIL 130 cargo is pretty much a rip-off of the Ural 375D, or at least they have exactly the same specs. So we're going to stick with this command vehicle. Infantry wise, since this is a tank deck, I would get my infantry to be a support force, and you can do that by focusing on the transports that they get, because a tank is usually very capable of dealing with another vehicle. It is not always the best option to use these against infantry or lighter vehicles. For that you want an autocannon, a grenade launcher and stuff like that. So that's what I would pick in this section. Now Jaeger went with 6 Sapri 85 napalm units. I'm not sure why he picked the Sapri 85. Interesting vehicle, by the way, the BTRT. Definitely a nice one to have in combination with the Sapri 85 because you get a grenade launcher. It is probably me, but I do not remember ever seeing this unit before. But again, probably me. This was probably in the game right from the start and I just overlooked it. Anyway, these guys are great infantry killers. What I would do, however, is go with 8 of them. I know that having them at hardened is going to make them slightly better, but they are very quick to die because they're only a 5-man squad. It would be nice to have Spetsnaz in here, but I don't think... No, we cannot have those because it's an armor limitation. So I'm going to delete these for now and get 8 of them at trained. Then he has Moto 90s, BMP 1D, armed with a grenade launcher, so definitely along my line of thought where you want to have a grenade launcher in order to deal with the enemy infantry or possibly vehicles, although a grenade launcher is not going to be the best option against vehicles, of course. But you got your large assortment of tanks for that. He has 24 Motostrelki 90, which are his main infantry. I don't think that you can get any infantry which is going to do that job better. You can fall back to the standard motos, but the standard motos only carry an RPG 7, which has a lot less armor penetration than the Motostrelki 90. 24 versus 14. You do sacrifice some range though. You sacrifice 175 meters in order to gain this missile launcher or this rocket launcher. So keep in mind that the targets will have to get a little closer than you might be hoping for. Bangangzus are interesting units, but they are just the same as Motostrelki. Transport wise, I do like this transport because it is one of the very few transports that are armed with AA missiles. The 9M31 is not the best, but in larger numbers they can really be annoying and unexpected. So this would be an interesting unit transport-wise, but the infantry that's coming in it is not that good. So I'm going to stick to the Motostrelki 90, but I might pick a different transport for them. We don't really need 24 BMP-1Ds with our grenade launcher. You can go for the BMP-1P, which has a Grom. I'm looking at the main gun on the thing because the Concours, well, it's nice to have, but I'm going for this thing for the gun. 20% accuracy, 9 rounds a minute rate of fire, makes it not really suitable for what I have in mind. It does not really carry the autocannon that I want. BMP-1, same thing. BMP-2 has an autocannon. It fires 562 rounds a minute. It is not exactly what you would call accurate with only 15% accuracy. BMP-1D does not fix that problem, and the BMP... sorry, let's have a look at these things as well. You can also get the BMP-3 here, which is definitely a lot better. But you also pay 15 points more for them, and you sacrifice quite some availability. I really do like these units, because the Arcan... the HEGM on this unit can really deal a lot of damage to enemy vehicles and tanks. Much more than you might expect. And besides that, those Arcans fly at an incredible speed, which makes them deadly to pretty much anything that they see, because the enemy will usually not have time to withdraw their forces. But, as I mentioned, it's quite expensive. This one is also an autocannon which has slightly better accuracy than the BMP-2 line. Of course, it's the 1986 version, it's the 1982 version. And you get a Concours M, which hits slightly harder than the one on the BMP-3. This is 21 armor penetration, and this is 23. But this thing cannot be fired on the move, and this thing can. Now, because I really like the BMP-3, I'm going to sacrifice some Motostrelkis. The reason for that is that I don't intend on going into a town anyway. If I am going into a town, I'm going to call on my hardened Motostrelki in their BMP-1D. If I'm operating out in the open, where I might have a forest or two, to clean out, or where I have a lot of infantry which is out in the open, then I'm going to call on my BMP-3s. In order to use their autocannon, their main gun, their 2A70, which does a nice amount of HE damage and has a good rate of fire, and their Arcan. Armor-wise, these things don't disappoint either, with 3 frontal armor, 2 side, 2 back and 1 top. So you have a pretty solid vehicle here. Now moving on to the next, he has Iglas in here. Let's have a look at what AA units you can get. You got the Iglas, you got the Igla N, and the Strela 3, and then the Strela 2. The Strela 2, I won't touch these. 30% accuracy, 3 HE power. You may need to fire up to 4 missiles into a target before it dies. So that's definitely not something I want to get into. Strela 3, again, really low HE power. The accuracy on this thing is slightly better. If you really want accuracy, you gotta go for the Igla line, where we can find the Igla and the Igla N. Let's see, he's bringing these in cheap transports. Yeah, what you get is cheap transports for these guys. Igla N is pretty damn accurate. The difference between the Igla N and the base Igla is that the HE damage on them is slightly higher. That's all the difference between these two. Because the HE damage is higher, the suppression value is also higher, which means that it's going to damage the enemy's morale faster. And that means that you have a higher chance of stunning the enemy unit. You're also going to panic helicopters that you're going to be firing at, but since these guys are cheaper and do pretty much the same thing, it only means that they cannot, or sorry, yeah, that they can one-shot most of the Blue 4 helicopters, especially the recon ones, which are not capable of sustaining more than 4 HE damage. I think that the base Igla is enough. And whether you pick them from the Soviet Union or from North Korea doesn't really matter. So we're going to go with the Iglas that he has in here. And then he has Concours M. They are good units. I'm not sure if I would be using these though. Reason for that is that you have a lot of tanks. And by a lot of tanks, I mean he has 66 tanks in this deck. So you might not need ATGMs, but they are nice to have, so I'm going to keep them in. Then, support-wise, he has one Tunguska M, good, or actually a great anti-air platform. You get the twin 2A38M, you get the 9M3111M missile. Disable the main gun on them and you will not be hit by seed, and these things can be incredibly deadly to helicopters. Especially since they can also do a range of 3300, which means that if you're dealing with a longbow, you will not be in trouble. This thing is going to shoot down a longbow before a longbow can hit you. Next up, the Type 80 Spog. Again, great range, not radar guided, so it's not going to have a great accuracy. But they have a decent range. They can be used against ground targets if you really want them to. They have a good amount of frontal armor, a surprising amount for a 25-point vehicle, so don't underestimate them armor-wise, because some of these things, depending on what you're using, will take 2 or 3 hits before they roll over and die, which is quite a decent amount of hits that they can take for a 25-point unit. I don't really like them though, because that 15% accuracy and for an AA gun a pretty low rate of fire. I mean, compare that to the autocannon that's on this thing, and you're going to see that it has not even 10% of the rate of fire of these autocannons. So this autocannon is by far inferior, but that's why you only pay 25 points and not 100. You do get 12 of them, but I don't think I'm going to be using this one. The Shilka, I think, wouldn't be an improvement already, although you lose a bit of range. And then there's the M1992 Spog, which is basically a Bereuza. Let's see, the difference is that this one has better range and fires a higher caliber round. 30mm, which means that the suppression damage is higher, although only slightly, because it's only 7mm difference. They are both radar guided. Armor wise, this thing is slightly better. Range against helicopters and airplanes is better. And I think that this would be a decent improvement over the Type 80 Spock, so I'm going to throw that one out and get 6 of these in. With this combined, I should have enough AA cover, at least gun-wise. The Pongays are also going to help with dealing with helicopters. Helicopters and airplanes are the worst enemies of armored decks if you're operating out in the open. If you're operating in a town, it's going to be infantry. But that's not really something that we can fix with the support section too much. We can use the Nona, of course, which is definitely a unit that I want to have in this deck. It's a nice mortar unit, and I already covered that thing in multiple videos, so I'm not going to touch it right now. He has the Buck M1, great long range AA platform, 4.5 kilometer range. Let's see what other units they have. Yeah, not really that many. You can go for the standard Buck, but you'll lose a bit of accuracy, 15% and a bit of range. You can go for the Tor, which has nowhere near the range of the Buck M1, but has a better range against helicopters, although helicopters are not a problem. We got the Tunguska M, we got the Bryusas, we got the Pongays, so we should be all set in the anti-helicopter department. Moving on, tanks. Let's talk armor. He has a good setup of tanks here, at least a large amount of them. Starting off at the left end and going towards the right, you're going to see that this thing is the cheapest, T55 55-point tank, up to the T72BU and the T90S and the T80UM. So he has 3 super heavies for 170, 175, and 180 points. Now this makes discussing the tank line very, very easy for me, so Jaeger, thanks very much for making it this easy for me. T55, good tank. You get 16 of these at Veteran. It's a workhorse. That is all that you want this tank to do. You want it to start dealing punches, or to start throwing punches and to take them, so that some of your heavy tanks, or heavier tanks, don't really need to do that. He has both the T55 AM2 and the T55 AMV. The difference is 5 points. Armor-wise, you get 1 point more armor, and I think that is all that you're getting. With that, I don't think that the T55 AMV would be the best option here. Let's see. I don't really like the 40% accuracy on this gun. What we could do is go for 2 cards of the T55 AM2 and take them off Veteran and switch them to Elite, which gives you 24 of these guys. T72s are also a nice option. Their accuracy is going to be slightly better than the one on the T55. Armor penetration is a bit lower, but frontal armor is better. So it's really a question of, do you want punching power of the T55, which carries also the Bastion with a 17 armor penetration weapon, or do you want the more heavily armored T72A? It's really a matter of preference. I like the T55 AM2. I've done great things with these units. T55 AMV I think is too similar to the T55, so for now I'm going to delete this one. Then he has the T62 MV. Whenever I see a T62, I'm always going, okay, low rate of fire, get rid of it. Rate of fire on this gun is 6 rounds a minute. That is way too low for this tank to be in the deck. It does carry the Arcan, which is the missile that I discussed from the BMP-3, which is a nice missile, but it is not the justification that I'm looking for in order to get this tank in the deck. So a T64 is good, a T62 is not, because a T64 has a range of fire of 9, which is 50% better than T62, so I'm also going to get rid of this one. One tank that I have grown to like lately is the BMP 65-8 or 685. Reason for this is that they are dirt cheap, 30 points. You get a ton of these guys at Elite, which gives them 30% more accuracy, and don't mistake that for this thing going plus 32%. It's 32% of this percentage. So you're going to be firing an accuracy of 70%, and with that you get 3 frontal armor, 11 armor penetration, but these things are also very quick. 70 kph off-road, good autonomy. I'm going to throw these in just to fill up gaps and to make sure that they can deal with infantry as well as the other vehicles. So that's the lowest end. I know I'm messing up the line of expensiveness or point value, but so be it. If I were to maintain that, I'd have to kick out every tank here, and I don't want to reconstruct the entire deck. The Chonma-Ho version has gotten an improvement. They have been granted a stabilizer, I believe, but it still makes them a pretty terrible tank because they don't have a high rate of fire, 6 only. So what I'm really looking for is something that fits the gap between 30 and 50, or between 55 and 90, because that is going to be the workhorse. Something between 55 and 90 gets you something like the T-64B with a Cobra. It gets you something like the T-72B, although that's very, very close to the T-64BM. Other units, Type 59s, stay away from these, they're not good. Let's see. Yeah, we could go for the T-64 AMV. That's probably why he has it in there. I'm definitely going to throw in one card of T-64Bs. The reason for this is that it's a nice filler between the B and the BM point-wise. Or sorry, between the B and the BMP 685. If you compare these two tanks, you're going to see that they both carry the Cobra, which have exactly the same specs. The main gun on the BM is better. It has 55% accuracy versus 45, 18 armor penetration, and it carries 3 points more frontal armor and gains medium optics. The T-64B though, it's not bad. It can deal quite some damage, especially with the Cobra. So I'm going to keep that one in here. Then we're going to look at whatever he has next, which is the 64BM, which I just covered, the BVIs. Great tanks these. They carry a lot of armor for a 120 point tank, got a nice amount of punching power, 19 armor penetration, 55% accuracy and no ATGM, which is something that sometimes I really like because it means that you don't have to keep supplying these things. ATGMs are usually quite the supply hog, and that means that they are going to drain your supplies, your FOBs, your logistics. It is micromanagement. T-64BV is the next one. I think that this one is too close to the 64BVI, and the gap between these tanks is going to be too big. I want something that sits around 150 points or 140, because that is going to be a nice intermittent ratio where you have a tool for pretty much any situation. Now you don't really have a lot of options. The options you do have are the T-80U and the T-672 OPR 1982. Otherwise, I don't think that North Koreans have anything to offer because they usually have pretty poor tanks apart from the T-90. So yeah, what we got here is the T-72 or the T-80U. Difference is that they are slightly faster. The T-80U line, they're always slightly faster than T-72. Main gun, more accurate. Stabilizer, 10% better. Armor penetration, exactly the same. And the HGM is different. The Sphere is a high or heavy hitting HGM, fired at 50% accuracy, 26-25 meter range, with 22 armor penetration. The Reflex is definitely an upgrade over that. It is a missile that has a ground range of 2800 meters, an accuracy of 50%, and an armor penetration of 22, but they can be fired on the move, and that makes them definitely worth it. So I'm going to throw out the BV here, and I'm going to add in a couple of veteran 1989s. So all in all, I took out 2 tanks. If you look at that, we started with 66. Now he has 3 super heavies in here, so this is definitely something we're going to be using because it's going to be the main punching power of this deck. So we got the UM, which has the Ingvar ATGM. This thing can be fired on the move pretty much as stable as an ATGM fired from a helicopter. They are that good. They punch through 24 points of armor. With that, you can punch through a Challenger 2 or a Leopard 2A5 or an M1A2 frontally. Yeah, they're going to do quite the significant amount of damage to anything that has less than 20 armor or less than 20 armor value. They got a great main gun, 23 armor penetration on these. The armor for these is slightly lower than, for example, you can find on the T-72BU, and the T-90 shares the 22 armor value as well. So comparing these, T-72BU and the T-90S, they are pretty much the same tank, save for the Sphere missile. You can see that their armor values are the same, their size, medium optics and speed are the same, autonomy is the same, the main gun is the same, and that's because the T-90S was, I believe, an import for North Korea from the USSR, from the T-72BU type. The one difference, and I think that this is too cheap actually, is that you get for 5 points the Sphere, which does not deal as much damage as the T-80M with its 24 armor penetration, but it's definitely a nice addition. 40% stabilizer, 50% accuracy while sitting still, 22 armor penetration. It's a nice to have. It's not a must have, it's a nice to have. Now, one thing that I am slightly concerned about if you have this many tanks or this many different tanks is that you're going to be confused. Which tanks do I take for which situation? Do I take a T-64 BVI or do I save up for a T-72 1989? If you find this setup confusing, make sure you have less difference in tanks. Go for the BMP 685, one card of those, possibly two if you're expecting to rush stuff with a lot of light vehicles. Get a second card of T-64s, throw in some T-72B1s, two cards of those, and that way you have less variety. It means that your toolkit is going to be slightly smaller, but for newer players who don't know all the new units, a smaller toolkit can be better, because you know exactly what tool to bring in what situation. Moving on to Reconnaissance, he has the T-55 Reconnaissance tank. Nice units these, North Korean type. I believe that they are exactly the same as the Reconnaissance T-55 for the USSR. The D-10T gun on both, T-55 from North Korea against the medium machine gun, the Dushka. Otherwise, exactly the same unit. They are not the fastest off-road. These things will lag behind your main tank force. Eventually, that is. Because the main tanks that we have a speed of 65, 80. 80 is very fast for a tank, by the way. 65, 70, 65, 70. So everything that we have here is faster than T-55. So the T-55 might not be the best option. You got the BRM 1K, but you only get a very low amount of those. Type 63 is faster than the T-55, but carries less armor. You do, however, get a nice supply of those, 8 or 12, which is exactly the same as the T-55. But they are small. They have a small size, which means that they are more difficult to hit. So you could go for that and try to abuse it. Make sure that you have something that can keep up with your tanks, and unfortunately we don't have a lot of units. PT-85 is not something I can keep up either, 50% or 50 kph. PT-71, same problem. So that only really gives us the Type 63, so that's what I'm going to use. I know that I'm sacrificing some armor, but so be it. And I'm going to go with 12 of these, because I'm expecting them to die pretty damn quickly. And with that I'm going to need filler material to make sure I have enough of those. Then a couple of Razvedkas in Mi-24As. You want to drop off your reconnaissance infantry anywhere, so good choice for these. And then Mi-2, which is exactly the same chopper as the USSR version. Vehicle-wise, he only has one tank, the Napalm T-62. Great unit. You want to have these in your deck if you have the room for it. because with these you have a large napalm capacity which can flush out infantry from a forest, if you're outside the forest that is, because I have tackled and killed these things if they are inside the forest. So make sure you keep it outside the forest where it does not run into infantry straight away. What I would like to get is the BMPT. It has a great grenade launcher, a main gun and an autocannon. And you could say that it reminds you a little bit of the BMP-3, and you'd be right, because the weapon systems on these things are similar. The difference is that you're paying more money, or more points in this case, for a unit that has 12 points more frontal armor, which is a huge amount. 12 frontal armor is going to save you in many situations, but I think that the capacity that this unit has, the BMPT, is already filled up by a combination of the BMP-3 and the BMP-1D. So we can get 2 vehicles for 55 points, or 1 vehicle for 70, and I do really like the BMPT. I think it's a nice tank. The problem is that it's we don't have any activation points in this deck. So be it. No BMPT in this deck. Helicopters, Mi-24 VPs, main attack gunships with Kokon M, 8 missiles of those, 2800 meter range. You could say you already have enough AT capacity if you're dealing, or if you're playing a tank deck, but sometimes you want to have a quick response force, and that's what these things excel at. And then he has the Mi-24P. These units can quickly go pretty much fulfill the same role as the Mi-24 VP. The difference is a lower end armor penetration on the Kokon, and they only carry 4 of those. They do carry more rocket pods, I believe. No, that's a different version. They both carry 80 of those 80mm rocket pods. One of these might be redundant, and one unit that I really like, but that you don't see that often, is this one. It's the MD500D AGS-17, which comes with a twin grenade launcher and is pretty much the counterpart to the American Little Bird. These grenade launchers are going to make life miserable for infantry. And I mean really miserable. These things have a rate of fire of 173 grenades per minute. Per second would be nice. 15% accuracy is not great, but you're going to just spray an area with these things. So, for my preference, and I will be playing this deck in a future gameplay video, is I'm going to delete the Mi-24P and throw in 12 of these guys, because I want to have, or I want this deck to have quick infantry or anti-infantry capacity, and the range of the grenade launcher is 1750 meters. Which is better than the one on the BMP-1D, which has a range of 1225. And that means that if you have a village which is infested with infantry, and which has, for example, only standard infantry, no AA infantry, you can come in with an napalm tank and with 1 or 2 of these guys and start spraying the town. Next up, you roll in with your Sapper 85s, you bring your BRT, because that also carries a grenade launcher, and you bring the RPO Rice to just clear out that town. That leaves us only with the air tab, and he has 1 bomber in here, the Su-24M, which carries 30 of these 250 kilogram bombs. This makes them very capable bombers. They can do a lot of damage to infantry mostly and light vehicles. They can stun tanks with their very high suppression ratio, but they will not do a lot of damage to tanks. He also has 2 Su-27PU fighters in here, so he went for a very, very heavy anti-air setup. I am a fan of having a very heavy anti-air setup in armored decks, because anti-tank planes can really, really mess up your day. We do have a large amount of AA units here already though, so getting only 1 plane per card I don't think is the best use of these points, especially since we're paying 3 points for it. Since he has a bomber and an air superiority fighter, I think that a multi-role or a bomber would be best. A seed plane is not really needed, because a seed plane is really only worth it if you have a lot of if you have a lot of air assets yourself. Now, since we only have 2 helicopter cards and an air superiority fighter that has exceptional ECM of 50% and a bomber that has an ECM of 20%, I don't think we need a seaplane. What we could use is something that can do damage to infantry. We have that. Or we could bring the B5, and this thing is something that you just bring for shits and giggles, pardon my French. Dropping a 3,000 kilogram bomb onto a target is like dropping a nuke in this game. You're going to do a shit ton of damage. 30 HE power, 600 points of suppression, which is the same as the Su-24. But if you have infantry in town, this thing will clear it out right away. The problem is that they carry 0% ECM, they are dead slow, but they have a strength of 15, which more or less negates that disadvantage. So I am going to throw in the B5, just because I think it's a fun unit. And you could argue that since we now have the B5, we could use a seaplane. Maybe. Let's see what kind of seeds we have to offer here. With the MiG-25 BMs or the Su-24s. The one good thing about seaplanes, especially the Su-24, is that they will usually kill an A or an AA unit, which is more expensive than they are if you do more than one sortie. The MiG-25 BM is more expensive, but has 4 missiles and better ECM, so better survivability. And since Jaeger is creating this deck to play not only for himself in a 1v1, but 2v2s and 10v10s, and he wants to make it an all-purpose deck, I think that having a seaplane in here could help, especially since we need something to clear the way for the B5. So let's bring in 1 BM, mostly to support the team members that I might have, and to clear the way for the B5. Naval section. He has an interesting setup here. Chongjus are something you don't really often see. I have, I think, never encountered these in a deck. But some people really like them because they carry a HE missile launcher. And with this, you could say that you have a form of naval artillery. If you don't have the capacity to bring an MLRS in the support tab and you do really want one, you can bring in the Chongjus. And with this MLRS you can still use the 7 HE power to clear out a town or to start damaging the infantry that's inside it. Keep in mind though, no CWIS, which means that they're going to be very easy pickings, but they are rivercraft, which means they cannot be targeted by anti-ship planes anyway. They also carry the D-70, which I believe is the same gun as the T-34 tank. No, T-34 carries a slightly different gun. But the turret looks exactly like a T-34 turret. Don't expect these things to rely on their main gun, because they are not that good. 20% accuracy, 5% if this ship is on the move. Rate of fire is terrible. We only get this thing for this weapon system. I do believe though that there is another weapon system that can do pretty much the same thing. Coastal support. Let's see. Yeah, the Schmel. The Schmel can do the same thing as the Chongju. The difference is that the Schmel has less missiles but of a higher caliber. They also carry a gun which is slightly better, although not much. But they carry a weapon system called the Dual Type 2M3M naval autocannons, which are going to be deadly against airplanes and helicopters. They are also rivercraft, which means they cannot be targeted by anti-ship missiles. So you can park these things in your own rivers if you have any in the map. So I'm going to throw out the Chongjus and get a couple of Schmels in. Another advantage is that you get more Schmels than you get Chongjus. You can get 3 of these guys or 6 of these. Now considering that he probably wants to use these ships as rocket or naval artillery, I'm going to pick 6 of them because we don't need a lower dispersion. We don't need panic reduction. Then he has the Red Dut. Let me select all. The Red Dut is an anti-ship missile battery which fires an incredibly high-end anti-ship missile. The Musket, which does 200 armor penetration. That means that if you can get one of these missiles to hit, you are pretty much guaranteed that the ship will sink. There are some ships which have higher value or higher strength than the 200 points, which are the super heavy ships, so the Congos. I'm not sure if this is the best weapon system for the job, though. Let's go for anti-ship artillery. I have never actually used these, I think, though. The Red Dut also has a great range of 6.3 kilometers. You can go for the Rubez, which is not really a great accuracy, 40%, or the Ball. Now these things carry a large amount of missiles, 8 of those, which means that you can, with 2 of them, spam 16 missiles. I'm not really sure how fast they reload those. Their armor penetration is a lot lower. But they're more expensive, 100 points. So for now I'm going to keep the Red Dut in and just test it out because I have never used these. Then he has the Su-27K anti-ship missile. You are not really going to have a lot of luck with 1 or 2 cards or 2 planes of Su-27K. So I don't think that this is the best use of this card. He also has the 5 bows. The problem I have with this setup is that all of these planes have a different speed. And usually the way to kill a ship is to just spam anti-ship missiles. And that means that you want those ship missiles to arrive at the same time. Now, since he is using this setup, or this particular section of the deck, as something that kills ships partly, and also partly supports the forces that he already has, I think I'm going to go for supporting forces. So let's see what kind of interesting units we can get. We can go for special forces. We can get some Spetsnaz VMFs. And with this we get a sniper team. Exceptional stealth is something that we don't yet have in our reconnaissance tab. So I'm going to bring in one of these. And keep in mind that since the BTR-80 has an exceptionally good range of 600, you can just use these things, bring them in your own naval zone, and from there get to the front line. Because you can still use these as a standard sniper unit. It's a standard recon. You could also go for the Spetsnaz GRU if you want to have a bit more punch, but you're going to sacrifice exceptional stealth for very good stealth. So I'm not going to do that. Let's see, tank destroyers. Not really something we need. We got the tanks ourselves to destroy the enemy. Flamethrower units. We have a flamethrower unit in the deck already. We don't need those. Infantry, AAAT, Commandos. Yeah, Commandos. This would be a nice addition. I know that the Sapperies are in the deck, but we only get 8 of those. So what I'm going to do is bring in Spetsnaz, and I'm going to bring those in the BTR-90. I know that makes it so that I don't get that many of them. The BTR-80 grants you 8, but the BTR-90 also grants you a grenade launcher, a great autocannon, an exceptionally good speed of 100 kph off-road, and very, very nice autonomy of 800. So we're going to take 6 Spetsnaz. You can go for double Spetsnaz if you're expecting a lot of trouble. But let's see what other units we can get. Let's see, artillery, MLRS. Yeah, not really anything that's that good. You could go for the BM-24 if you want napalm, because these things fire napalm missiles that just don't have a great range, only 12,000 meters. Go for a howitzer. None of these have a particularly great dispersion. Mortars we already have, so we don't need those. Cavalry tanks we already have. Let's see, fire supports. Yeah, not really. Infantry. You can get reservists. Okay, if you like spamming infantry, get some Yukwi days, because this gives you 32 15-man squads, which is an enormous amount. Just don't expect them to do a lot, because the SMG Well, they're lucky if they are going to hit anything, so that's not that good. MBTs 45 to 85. Yeah, it's the same tanks we already have. Recon we have, Special Forces we have. So yeah, I'm gonna go with another card of Spetsnaz here. Whoops. Let's just get these guys this way then. And we're just gonna get, since we have 2 slots, I'm gonna get 2 cards of Elite Spetsnaz. So it's a bit of a different use from the naval tab than what you might be used to, where you're going after ships or after setting up your own fleet. But I'm going to leave that to another player so that I can myself go with Spetsnaz or Spetsnaz VMF. So this, I think, would make for a very interesting deck, and I will be trying it out some point later this week. I'm not entirely sure when yet, but just tune into my channel every day and you might see this video up, I think Thursday or Friday, depending on whether I have a good game in, of course. So with that, it's the end of the video. I hope you like watching it. Jaeger, I hope you found use for this video. I hope it taught you how I think about tanks, about armored decks, and particularly about the naval section, because it might not be what you're expecting. If you found this video useful, please hit the like button down below, and if you still have a question about this deck, leave it down in the comments. In the description you're going to find the deck code so that you can import this deck for yourself. If you want to use it, let me know how it goes and what kind of additions or changes you would make to it. With that, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.